G'day everyone, this
G'day.
is Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, the co-founder and CEO of Aureus Financial.
Sam Panetta, the COO and co-founder of Aureus Financial.
And welcome to our 6th episode of Ask Aureus Anything, our live Q&A we do on a weekly basis, and is the second episode that we've done at 5:30.
Yep, we moved the time slot from 1:30, I believe, to 5:30, so more people could attend. And it seems to be working.
Yep, so thanks for everyone jumping aboard. We've had some really good questions. We had our first small business workshop for the year on Saturday, which was a great turnout. We had a phenomenal day and we really enjoyed delivering some value to the community, both new clients, some fresh faces, and also some existing clients that got a lot out of it, which was great. Good news, we've actually recorded the event. Yeah, we did miss out on Aftershock, Mark. I'm sorry, mate. Priorities first. Unfortunately, I don't have a functional bike at the moment anyway, so couldn't attend. But Small Business Workshop was fantastic. We recorded the event, so we're in the process of editing all of that, and we'll be uploading that onto our soon-to-be released member portal that is going to be full of phenomenal value and hopefully allow you guys who aren't in the local vicinity of our office, or those of you who can't make our events, to be able to consume the content, which is great. So let's dive in. For those of you who have any questions, feel free to ask, whether it's finance, business, marketing, even Aftershock related. I may not be able to answer the questions about Aftershock, but I'll give it a crack.
Before we get stuck into a bit of legal jargon, this is general advice only, not specific tailored advice. So before you go away and action anything, make sure you consult a professional.
Fantastic. So whilst we're waiting for the questions to roll through, we have some from the weekend actually. So we focused primarily on creating $1 million mindset and creating a lifestyle business. And there were some questions that came up about investing, and I guess the whole idea of the event was that we didn't want to dive into the nitty-gritty of investing. We wanted to keep it big picture. So we didn't have a whole lot of time to answer that, but I did say that I was going to cover it in our Q&A. So the question was, you talk a lot about investing. What's the best way to invest and what should I invest in? Now, this is quite a difficult question to answer, but it ultimately depends on your situation. And what I'll pre-frame with is that ultimately, when you're looking to invest, you shouldn't be making the decision based on the investment decision itself. Like anything in life, whether it is an investment such as shares, property, or a business, it is a vehicle to get you to your destination. So you need to get clear on what you want as an individual, what you need in your business, what you need personally, what you need for your family before you dive in feet first into an investment decision. The first thing you need to consider is, am I chasing growth or income, and why? So for example, if you've got a great business, you've got all of the means that you need in order to live your lifestyle, and you're looking to build wealth for the future, then typically income is not going to be what you're chasing. You'll be chasing capital growth. Conversely, if you are trying to reduce the amount of hours that you're working, you don't want to continue to work in the same capacity, and in order to do that, you need to have income to supplement your lifestyle, then you should be looking to create a portfolio that's based on that. Typically, when you get started in investment, it's about education. It's about understanding the types of asset classes that you're confident with that are going to provide you with the characteristics that you need to support your wealth journey. If that's property, fantastic. If that's shares, fantastic. But I always advocate that my clients educate themselves about a little of everything, so then they can make informed and educated decisions, as opposed to just continuing to do the same old thing over and over again, expecting the same results. An example of that is that Australians love property. We love property too. But property has its place in your portfolio. We understand that given particularly the growth in the Sydney property market and Melbourne property market, that we can't expect to get double-digit returns in the property market every single year for the next 10 years. It is likely that the property markets here are going to soften, and we're already seeing that, and are going to probably sit flat for a while. So if you're chasing returns for your money in those markets over the next 3 or 4 years, it's probably not the best place to invest. So you need to understand that your strategy needs to change and evolve based on what you want. If it's a 30-year plan, probably not going to make a big difference. Get money in the market, continue to accumulate, and build wealth.
Yeah, and we could go on about this all day. So I get a lot of people that come up to me. They go, "Sam, what should I invest in?" And I say, "Well, it depends. What are you trying to achieve?" And they go, "Well, don't you just have this one perfect investment where I should put my money and all my dreams will come true?" No, that's not how it works. So you need to figure out, as Jackson said, what your goals are. Then you build a strategy to get you from where you are today to your goals, and then you invest in whatever you need to execute on that strategy. So it's a 3-step process. You need to work backwards.
Yeah.
Jackson touched on the property markets, right? Residential real estate. So for years that was a very good investment, especially in Sydney and Melbourne. But over the past, say 18 months, 24 months, APRA and the powers that be have essentially restricted how much money people can borrow, and that's taken a lot of people out of investing in residential real estate because they can't borrow the money from the banks to do so. So when you're faced with that position, and a lot of people in Australia, a lot of Australians have this mentality that all I invest in is residential real estate. Now, that's great when you can, then residential real estate's going up. But when you can't borrow anymore, you can't save any more deposit. Well, what are you going to do? Not invest for the next 10 years? You need to look at alternatives, and that's something where the strategy comes back into it and broadening your mind a little bit.
Let me give you a case study. We had a client that came to us recently, and for one reason or another, they only have a single income. And because of that, they have a deficit in their budget every single month. And they were lucky enough to get an early inheritance, which has given them a sum of money. And the first thing that they wanted to do is potentially look to utilise that to buy a property. Now, in light of the fact that their cash flow didn't support it, because typically, especially if you're going to be buying a property in Sydney as an investment, it's going to be cash flow negative. And because of that, we said, well, it's actually not going to be the solution to your problems. So with the money they received, we actually are looking to create a portfolio that is going to be a diversified portfolio of index funds that are going to provide them with allocation across the whole world in share markets and listed property. And as a result of that portfolio, it's actually going to provide them with enough income to not only fill that hole in their budget and be able to maintain the lifestyle that they want, but it's going to be very, very simple and require little to no maintenance whatsoever. So once again, we defined the destination. They needed to fill a hole in their budget and they wanted to live a comfortable lifestyle, and property wasn't the answer. Surprise, surprise. So once again, if you're looking to invest, educate yourself, work out what you want, and then find a solution that actually fits in line with your plans.
Excellent. All right, this was a question I received this morning. They've said to me, I've heard you mention offset accounts often. Can you please explain how they work? Okay, so an offset account is when you have a home loan, sometimes you get the offset account feature. Okay, so an offset account at its rawest is just a transaction account, but is linked to your home loan with the offset feature. And we use it to save on your interest bill every month. The way it functions is any money that's in your offset account reduces your home loan, the interest you pay on your home loan, by that dollar amount. So to put it into perspective, if you have a home loan of $500,000 and you have an offset account that is linked to that home loan with $100,000 in it, then that month you'll only pay interest on $400,000. Now, for someone who's paying their home off, this is making their repayments every month really supercharged, and it's really smashing off the principal in the loan. For someone who's an investor, and let's say they have $500,000 interest only home loan, and they've got a lot of savings, let's say they've got $500,000 in savings, then they put that savings in the offset account, they're paying zero interest every month. So they've still got a $500,000 home loan, they've still got $500,000 cash in their bank account, but they're not paying no interest on their repayments. So it's a very useful tool, and you use it in different ways depending on what your circumstances are.
And this is interesting. I think that given that the lingo, particularly in all things finance, it confuses people, right? And I think the banks rely on this. They try and create a whole lot of complexity for their customers. in the effort for you to go astray and take longer to pay off your loan, all right? I was having a conversation with a client recently who's done really well for themselves. They've built a fantastic business, and they had a pretty substantial home loan in excess of $1 million, but they had $1 million sitting in cash in their offset. And they go, well, so Jackson, when are we going to pay off our home loan? And they go, your home loan's paid off. They go, no, we've got over $1 million still owing to the bank. Yes, but you've got exactly the same dollar amount sitting in offset, meaning that every single month you're not paying any interest. Any additional amounts that you pay to the bank are actually your principal repayments, which are allowing you to get ahead. But if you wanted to, you could tell the bank to go and take all of that cash and close out the facility, meaning that you had no debt left. Now, the reason why we wouldn't do that is because we have that facility that we can utilize for other things. And this is one of the main reasons why an offset account is so valuable if you use it appropriately. It gives you the flexibility to redraw that cash, pull it out of that transaction account and use it for other things, hopefully constructive things, whether it be for a deposit on the next property, whether it be investing it back into your business, going and pulling that out and putting it into a more diversified portfolio. Whatever it may be, it gives you that flexibility. And while it's sitting there, it's working for you by offsetting the interest, which is a fantastic outcome.
Yeah, and I guess further to that, we do a lot of cash flow management for our clients where we have, multiple bank accounts that serve different purposes. And sometimes when we structure it all with the right lender, with the correct lender, we can have not only one bank account as an offset account, but we can have 4 or 5 bank accounts, all as offset accounts. So that means that every single dollar that they own in their entire life is effectively helping them pay off their mortgage quicker.
Which is really valuable. Cool. All right. Any of you that are watching, if you've got any questions, just feel free to chuck them up there. There's no such thing as a silly question.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's probably stuff that you've got on your mind that you wanted to ask us about. So feel free to chuck it up there and we'll answer it. All right. So the next question that we got here from the weekend as well is, I've been reading and I want to invest for passive income and replace my salary. Does this actually work? And if so, how can I do it? So this kind of links back into that investing question. And it is something that's very common. Now, once again, we seem to be conditioned by society to feel like we need to create passive income straight away. And we need to understand that, yes, passive income is important, but at a certain stage of your life. Now, when we look at investments, typically an investment either produces an amount of income, an amount of capital growth, or a balance of the two, depending on the type of asset. So let's look at residential property as an example. Typically in an area, you might be getting a rental yield, which is basically the percentage of rent you receive as a percentage of what the value of the property is, in the vicinity of, let's say, 4 to 4.5%. In Sydney, after the growth that's happened, significantly less, let's say 3%. But let's say 4.5%. And we've seen that Sydney property or property across Australia has consistently provided a certain amount of capital growth. If you look at historically, it's probably around 4.5 to 5%. So in total, it's about 9.5 to 10% in total return. Now, we need to consider that when we look at residential property, we've got, from the income perspective, the costs. We've got strata rates if it's a townhouse or a unit. We've got council rates. We've potentially got land tax. All of these different things that we need to pay for, which is a cost. So when we look at actual net income, if we're getting 2.5, 3%, we're doing all right. In comparison, if we look at, say, a portfolio of blue chip Australian shares, the top companies in Australia pay really high dividends, some of the highest in the world. And they typically pay, say, 5, 6%, but they're fully franked, meaning that the company's already paid 30% tax. So if we gross up that rate of income, it can be in the vicinity of 7, 8, even 9%. So there are ways that you can get a considerable amount of income, but depends on what stage of the journey that you're in. Income is not compounding. So if you've got $1 million investment that is paying you a 5% return every year, so 50 grand, but that $1 million isn't going up, you will continue to receive that $50,000 every single year for the remainder of the investment term. But if you've got an investment that is compounding in value, so that $1 million is increasing in value, and as a result of that compounded value is also paying you an income, not only is the capital increasing, but the income that you are receiving will increase proportionately to the increase of the investment value. So typically when you're going through your accumulation phase, most people are chasing growth. There are ways you can replace your income, but typically doing it in the first instance is counterproductive to your overall wealth strategy. So get your wealth goals in line and in the right order. We refer to this as the wealth pyramid. As part of my book in the wealth management section, I go through this extensively to tell you the order in which you should be going about accumulating wealth and at what points you should be considering growth or income or a mixture of the both, depending on what you're trying to achieve.
And I think there's a big misconception here, right? It pisses me off a little bit. A lot of people in our industry, they're taking the piss a little bit and they're trying to sell this dream of, work with me for 12 months and we'll invest in this, this, and this, and you'll be cash flow and you'll be able to retire from your job. And they're selling the dream, right? It's not possible. Unless you have a very substantial asset base, you're still going to have to work to meet your living costs. If you had, let's say you had an asset base of $10 million, all right, and then you could live off the returns from your assets. But if you've got an asset base of 100,000 or 200,000 or even 500,000, that's not enough to live your life just off yields off the assets. So what most people should focus on doing is growing that asset base first, in their younger years, in their working years, and as they get older, living off the yields and off the returns. But it's a big misconception. A lot of people come to us, they say, we want to get, a cash flow positive property. I saw an ad on it, or I listened to some wizard, and he was saying that, you buy this cash flow positive property. If you're making $50 a week off a property, what are you going to do with that? You're going to buy a case of beer a week with it. You can't. It's not enough. So, yeah.
I'm going to name and shame. Robert Kiyosaki is probably one of the most notorious at this. This guy goes around the world preaching about cash flow positive property, and majority of his income that he earns is from people who fall for the trap and pay for his education. He doesn't make majority of his income from his cash flow positive property that he's selling the dream to you for. So you need to understand that there's reasons why assets like, for example, residential property that is not synonymous with being a high income asset class is high cash flow or cash flow positive. It's likely because it has not grown for a considerable amount of time, meaning that over time rents have little by little been increased and essentially has turned it into being something that's cash flow positive. Now, is that something that you really want? You want a dog property in a regional area, and just because of the fact that it hasn't performed is the only reason why it's cash flow positive? Probably not. So be careful where you're getting your advice from.
All right. Excellent stuff. All right, so this was another question from the weekend, and it was a really good one. So one of the ladies in the crowd, she said, you spoke earlier about growth businesses and cash flow businesses. What is the difference between a growth business and a cash flow business? So this is really important, all right? So we talk a lot about investing in assets, okay? And typically there's three kinds of growth assets that you can invest in. There's shares, there's property, and there's business, okay? There's sort of growth assets that you can grow your wealth with. Now, when you have a business, not all businesses, especially small and medium-sized businesses, they don't all have a value. They're not all an asset that's worth something. Let me give you an example. If you had, let's say, a sole trader, a photographer who worked for herself and she made 150 grand a year working 50 hours a week because she was selling her labor, and that business model is not really worth anything because she's the entire business. If she's not there selling her labor and taking photos, then the business isn't earning any money, okay? That is what you would call a cash flow business. On the flip side of the coin, you have a business, let's say a property development business. That has real assets in it. So a developer comes along, buys a property, that property has an intrinsic value, let's say it's worth $1 million, and then they spend $1 million on it, and let's say at the end of it, they've got an asset that's worth $2.5 million. That business, that company is a growth business because it has value. It's now valued at $2.5 million. And you can grow your wealth with businesses like that because you can just continue to compound them as if they were property or as if they were shares. The key takeaway to this is that business owners that are in growth growth businesses can grow their wealth through their business. Business owners that are in a cash flow business cannot. They cannot grow their wealth through their business. What they have to do is they have to take the cash flow that they're earning from their business and they have to invest it in real cash, in real growth assets, such as real estate and such as shares. And if you don't do this, you can work for 50 years being the owner of your cash flow business. And at the end of it, you're not going to have an asset there to sell. You're going to have no real asset. So yeah, if you're a business owner, if you're a sole trader, if you're in any sort of business that isn't growing in value, then you need to take that cash flow out of that business and you've got to start investing it in real growth assets.
Yeah, and there's a couple of ways you can approach it, right? And I think that's sometimes a bit of a harsh reality for some business owners. Oh, my business is worth something. Well, sorry, mate, no, it's not. If you're a key person in your business and you are the one that's trading time for money, and if you were no longer in the business, if the business would have a substantial decline, or would cease completely, then it's not worth anything. And if there's really no recurring revenue in your business or products or assets in your business that have an intrinsic value or that can be valued at either a multiple of EBIT or its recurring earnings or profitability, then it's not worth anything either. So you can convert a cash flow business in being an asset-based or growth business by being able to address those things. We had a guy on the podcast today who is a coach for health businesses, particularly physiotherapists, PTs, chiropractors, these types. And typically those types of businesses are essentially about how many hours you can be seeing patients and be billing for their time. And typically a lot of those businesses don't have a very high valuation multiple because it is the technicians who are the value in the business. But what he's been able to do extremely well is convert his intellectual property into assets that are on a subscription-based model where he can sell that intellectual property on a recurring basis to others who want to benefit from his knowledge and his experience. So by just creating a product that has recurring revenue in your business, then you can create an asset. But you need to understand what is the actual value of that asset and how does that compare to how you can utilize your excess cash flow to be able to invest in other things that are just going to work without you even having to worry about it. For example, building a portfolio of shares or of property that is a passive investment.
Yeah, and I think it's not so much, one's better than the other. People have different lifestyle choices and things like that. But if you are in business, you need to understand if you're in a growth business or if you're in a cash flow business. That is really important. It's only once you realize you're either in a growth business or a cash flow business can you build a strategy around that.
Exactly right. Cool. All right. So the next one, this is a really important one. And this came up on the weekend as well, and also with a few wealth coaching clients that we're working with at the moment. So I'm starting a business. Why is it so important to do a cash flow forecast? It's taking forever. And this is really important. Most businesses who start generally don't do this exercise. They don't generally go through the exercise of creating a cash flow forecast to understand what their first 12 or 24 months is actually going to look like. Now, typically, as part of a business plan process, people who are starting up a business might do it, but they want to make it look sexy for the purposes of raising investment, or they want to make it look great so they can go to the bank and get funding. But they typically are very rarely real with themselves and understand what are the different types of things that could happen in their first 12 months of business. So typically what we try and get our clients to do is to do 3 scenarios. And I also believe that this can work well for established businesses too. You should be doing a cash flow forecast and establishing a budget for every 12 months that you're in business. And the aim is to do 3 scenarios. You do a good scenario, a better scenario, and a best scenario. And the aim of this is to have the ability to contrast the different types of outcomes that could be achieved. So if you're in a startup business, your good scenario should be really the worst possible outcome. What is if everything didn't work out, I wasn't able to build my business quick enough, I wasn't able to get enough customers in the door, what's that going to look like for my first 12 months? And then it's about saying, okay, well, what would be a better scenario where things had picked up a bit faster, things had started to go my way, and then the last scenario is the best scenario. What is the best possible outcome that I could realistically achieve over the next 12 months? Now, it's likely that if you're in a startup business, you're not going to know exactly what that looks like. For example, we recently did this with a cafe that's starting up. Now, in a product-based business that has high volume, it can be really, really difficult to work out, well, how many things am I going to sell? What do they cost me to produce? What are my costs going to be? And it's because of the difficulty of that exercise that you should be investing the time into it. Because imagine if you did this exercise and you realized that you weren't actually going to get to a profitability point for the first 9 or 10 months. How are you going to fund that shortfall? Is that going to be something that you have cash flow that you can support that? Is it something that you're going to rely on borrowing money from the bank? And if you answer no to both of those things, then you're going to go broke. Your business will close as quickly as it started. So unless you go through this exercise, take it seriously, and further to that, compare it as you start to go along the actual and show what the variance is. That is really eye-opening. We do this with our personal cash flow clients and our business clients. We get them to do the budget and then we track it to the actual. And in the first few months, you start to see the gap between what they actually thought they were going to spend and earn and what they actually spent and earned and what's left over. And it's only at that point that they start to build that awareness of what that gap is and then start implementing strategies to address it.
We do this in our own business. We do it all the time. We probably do it more often than most. When we first started talking about the business, we've done our cash flow forecast, and then when the business launched, we've done another cash flow forecast. We'll probably do another one next month, and we'll continue to do that, and I guess benchmark ourselves against how we thought we were going to perform, how we thought the business was going to perform, to how it's actually performing. And the reason you do this is so you can actually go away and say, all right, it's not performing as well as I thought in these areas. What levers can I pull to get it back on track? Or you look at other parts and go, wow, this area of the business is actually performing really well. Why don't we focus a little bit more attention here because it's performing better than we thought? And that's knowledge is what helps you grow a business.
Yeah, exactly right. Cool.
All right. All right, so this is a conversation out of with a client this week. She came to me, she goes, I saw the podcast this week and I know that you are big advocates of property investment advisors. However, my family thinks I can find a property on my own. What are the benefits of using an expert in this area? So a lot of people are conflicted by this. A lot of people don't like paying for advice, and it's especially that old WOG mentality. They try to do everything themselves. You know what I mean? They don't like to pay for advice. They don't like to take advice. The benefits are huge. So I'll probably never buy a property again without having a property investment advisor on board. You have to think. Let's say that you pay a $10,000 or $15,000 fee to a property expert to go out and find you a property, and you're going to make a $500,000 or $750,000 or $1 million investment. What's a $10,000 or $15,000 or even a $20,000 fee to make sure you got the right one? If you're buying $1 million property and it fluctuates in value by 2%, that's the fluctuation of the fee, right? They're going to help in building a strategy for you. They're going to help in sourcing the property. They're going to help in negotiating the property, backed by all their macro and micro research. So they look at, this is good property investment advisors, mind you, not the shonky crooks that are out there. So you look at, they take an overview of Australia, which states are performing the best, in those states, which cities are performing the best, in those cities, which suburbs are performing the best, in those suburbs, what are the best streets to invest in those streets, which is the house that's going to suit you or the unit that's going to suit you. Now, anyone can go out and buy a property. All you need is a bit of money and a pre-approval. You can go and you can buy any property you want. But there'd be maybe 1% or 2% of the properties in the entire country what would be considered investment grade, that are actually going to grow in value faster than the averages. And that's what you pay an expert for, to make sure you nail that decision.
Well, it's little things as well, like, for example, understanding the valuation methodology, right, of what methodologies the bank actually use when it comes to valuing a property. We had a scenario where we spoke to a property investment advisor who had that valuation background, and they had a really extensive checklist. And one of the things on the checklist was not having retaining walls that were higher than a meter. And I asked, I go, well, why? What's the problem? Well, if it's over a metre, it needs to be engineered. And if there's anything ever that goes wrong, it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars to get fixed and probably months and months of headaches and stress. And I go, wow, I didn't even realise that. So it's little things like that where they're able to objectively get out of that potentially emotional decision, because we know that everyone loves bricks and mortar and you can get caught up in the moment because a house looks great at the surface. But I even know, like, walking through an open house for 5 minutes, you're so overwhelmed by all of this new information that you're trying to take in. By the time you walk out, you've forgotten half of the things that you were going there to look at in the first place. So having somebody who's done it hundreds, if not thousands of times before, and is able to take that objective viewpoint of being able to go in and look at it as just being an investment that they're selecting on behalf of a client, gives you that extra peace of mind to know that all of the checks and balances have been done. And a good example, like we had Will on the podcast this week, and Will is really a standout when it comes to property investment advisors. So his heart's really in the right place because he was an investor first that got burnt, and off the back of that, aimed to go out and ensure that nobody else ever had to go through the same experience that he did. And we know them for the property that they've selected, in areas where the market has done really poorly as a macro, they've been able to find areas that have been highly performing that have returned double digits last year, which is fantastic. And that means that really, if you're paying your 10 or 15 grand as an investment for these individuals, as long as they're doing their job, you should make that back in the first couple of months. So what's a couple of months in the grand scheme of things of an investment that you could potentially be holding for 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah, no, that's right. Look, we've got a big thing in motto, and you would say, stick to what you're best at and outsource everything else.
Exactly right. Yeah. Cool. So this is a good one, and we covered this on the weekend. It was actually really surprising. I find that this is a theme, right? We had our workshop on a Saturday. It was a full day workshop. We had some people that were kind of whinging about it, saying, oh, why is it a full day? Why is it on a Saturday? And we had a really good group of people turn up. And we know that people who take these things seriously, that turn up, do the work, get the most value out of it, and typically run really good businesses and have implemented the right things. And out of the room, when we asked this question, which was the importance of paying yourself first, majority of the people in the room were doing it. So the question is, you mentioned the importance of paying yourself first. And as a business owner, what do you mean by this and why is it so important? And this is about having the right mindset in your business. The typical business owner, typically a sole trader or the technician, generally pays themselves last. And what I mean by that is that any income that comes into the business, how much of that income is actually theirs to keep? So they have income that comes in, they've got to pay their tax, they've got to pay their GST, they've got to pay their wages, they've got to pay all their bills, and then whatever's left is what they take home. Now, a good business owner pays themselves first. They have an abundance mindset where they know how much they need in order to live their life. And regardless of what happens in their business, they always have enough to be able to pay themselves what they're worth. And it's having this type of mentality that allows business owners to drive themselves forwards. We find that for a very long time, a lot of small businesses have had this mentality of tax minimization. I'm only going to take a small wage. I'm going to pay my wife, who's stay-at-home mum, a wage for bookkeeping to keep my costs down. I'm only going to show 30 grand, and I'm going to write everything else that I possibly can off on costs. I think this comes as a criticism to the accounting industry. Typical suburban accountants take the mickey. They kind of probably succumb to their clients' demands of minimising their tax, aren't willing to have a conversation with them about the implications, and are really just validating their worth by saying, hey, I saved you this much in tax. Well, it's because you didn't show any income. It's not hard to save tax if you're not making anything. So most good business people pay their tax, they pay themselves what they're worth, they show sizable profits, and they aim to set themselves up for growth and success. Your business and you as an entrepreneur are like a tree. You're either growing and thriving or you're rotting and dying. Choose one. If you want to grow and thrive, pay yourself first.
And look, this ties into, you need to treat yourself as a person and as an individual in the business as a company. You've got to treat them as two separate things. You should have your own assets, your own liabilities, your own income and your own expenses, and so should the business. So in order for you to grow your wealth personally outside of the business, or even just live your life outside of the business, you need to be paid a wage or a salary or commissions or something for the amount of work that you're doing in the business every week or every month. The worst thing I see is when business owners merge everything. They merge their personal expenses, their business expenses. Everything's just one big boiling pot, and it doesn't do them any favors. They get in trouble with the tax man. They don't know which liabilities are for what, where, who needs to be paid what bill when, and it's an absolute mess. And we've had to go on in more than once and help clean this up and do damage control for people and say, hold on, you need to segregate this. You're using your business money to pay for your holidays, or none of this makes any sense. You need to be a professional. If you're going to be a business owner, do it professionally and segregate what's yours and what's the business's.
The worst thing that I ever saw was people that were taking cash out of their business and feeding it into the pokies.
Yeah, you can't do that.
You can't. There's nothing. That's the epitome of bad business, right? There's things in life that you should not do, and one thing you should do is segment and have clear segregation between what's your business's and what's yours. And the sooner you do that, the more successful that you'll be.
Yeah, and don't take cash out of the business to play the machines.
Just don't play the machines.
Don't play the machines at all. Actually, that's some good financial advice.
Oh gosh.
All right, so this is a question I get every single day. If we had a volume-based system for these Q&A sessions, then it would just be this question.
If you got $1
over and over again,
$1 every time you got asked this question, you would be a squillionaire.
I'm going to record my answer, and I'm just going to send it to people as they ask me. So had another property investor come to me today, go, I want to buy another property, but I can't get any more finance. What can I do? Look, we're banging on about this a lot because it's a question that gets asked so much. I feel that if I'm getting a handful of clients asking me every single week, then there's other people out there that want to know what's going on. So typically, property investors that have 1, 2, 3 properties, they're pretty keen. They want to go again. They want to buy more properties. What's happened is the APRA and the powers that be have made it harder to borrow money. Not so much for first home buyers and things like that, but for these multiple property investors, they're putting very big buffers on their existing debts, and they're making it hard for them to continue to borrow more and buy more property. Now, they're doing this for the right reasons. They're doing this so people don't get themselves in a hole and have $100,000 a year incomes with $1 or $2 million worth of investment property debt. If interest rates go up, it's not sustainable. You're going to run into a little bit of trouble. So I guess to answer the question, what can you do? All right, you can do a couple of things. You can start investing in other assets outside of property. So stop taking on debt to invest and start investing in managed funds. Or, if you're a business owner, invest back in your business. If you can save a bigger deposit, so, knuckle down on your own cash flow and save larger deposits. You can start paying off any unsecured debts, any expensive debts. If you've got car loans, personal loans, credit cards, start getting rid of those. That'll really help. You can supercharge your business. So really get stuck into your business, push the growth, where, 4 months out from the end of the financial year, go hard for the rest of the year, get your income up, get the revenue up, get the profits up, pay yourself a bigger salary, and then your tax return is going to be stronger at the end of the financial year. You're going to be able to borrow more. If you're not self-employed, you're an employee, you can do more hours to get your income up. You can study more, get a promotion, get a pay rise. If you're on commission-based work, you can work a little bit harder, a little bit smarter, and earn some commissions. Essentially, you need to get your income up or your savings up. The lending rules are not going to get easier. They've tightened them up. They're probably going to stay tight now for a very long amount of time. So if you must accumulate wealth in investment properties, you need to work your way around that. You need to get more equity, or you need to get more earnings.
Yeah, it's always good to have a target. Just because you can't borrow any more money now, doesn't mean you give up and go spend all that cash. Understand what is your debt ceiling. So let's say, for argument's sake, your total amount of debt that you can borrow is $1 million. Now, if you have essentially a goal to go buy another $500,000 property, you essentially either need to pay down your debt by that amount to allow you to have that usable debt ceiling that you can reallocate to that new property, or you need to build up more wealth or more income to allow you to be able to service more debt. So set a goal for yourself and work towards it, irrespective of how the vehicle that you're going to use to get there, whether it's debt or cash or whatever that may be. You should be trying to do whatever you can to continue to fuel the growth of your wealth portfolio and continue to work towards your goals.
Yeah, look, I'll use my personal situation, right, as an example. So the next time I buy a property, I'll probably max out on my borrowing capacity. So my next big property purchase, I'll be tapped out for now. So what other levers can I pull? Well, I can pull two levers. I can either work the business a lot harder and try grow revenue, grow profits, and pay myself a bigger cut of the business, or I can begin to invest in other assets that don't require debt. It's a fund, so many funds and things like that will in turn pay me dividends and increase the amount of money I bring into the house every month. So for me, it's about, getting this next property and then working out, all right, for me to borrow again to buy the next property, what do I need to do? I need to either work harder in the business or invest in other assets that are going to pay me dividends. And then once you've hit those targets, you can go back and buy the next property. So you need to be a little bit more smarter about things and not have one tool just walking around with a hammer trying to hit things. Sometimes you need to pull a screwdriver out.
Yeah, exactly right. Good point, mate. This is another question that we got on the weekend, which was, we discussed the importance of marketing a lot today. Can you please provide some key takeaways? And look, the world of marketing is scary. There's so many strategies and tactics and so-called thought leaders out there that as a small business owner, it can be really overwhelming to identify what you need to do in terms of your marketing strategy in your business. I'll give you a couple of key takeaways. The first one is get clear on your ideal customer, your customer avatar. You need to speak to a person or a series of people who speak your language and are willing to do business with you based on the solutions that you provide for their problems. There's no point having a scattergun approach. If you're in business and you're trying to, and you can say, I can do business with everyone, you're wrong. Because it means that you can't speak everyone's language. You're going to be too general if you're trying to speak to everyone. So you need to get clear on the type of person that you want to work with. Is it small business people? Is it entrepreneurs? Is it white collar professionals? Is it stay-at-home mums? Is it retirees? Whatever it may be, there are exercises that you can complete called the customer avatar profiling exercise that will allow you to get really clear on your avatar or avatars. You can have multiple in your business. Then it's about understanding their problems, their pains, their gains, and the things that you can provide to alleviate those pains or help them work towards their gains. It's typically the exercise of understanding whether those individuals are wanting to work towards pleasure or buffer away from pain, one or the other. Then it's about having a robust marketing strategy. So if marketing is not a kind of transactional thing, you don't just do it once and expect to get the results. It's a process of constant iteration, testing and trialing different things to see what resonates with that customer avatar and what doesn't. And ideally, once you can identify those things, then you can give them more of what they want. And ultimately these days, people don't want to be hard sold. They don't want to be smashed with promotions and discounts and all of this product sales-based stuff all the time. People want value. People want to be given value and allowed to make decisions when they're ready to. So the idea is not to try and strong arm your ideal prospects or customers into doing business with you. Those days are done. So if you are illustrating value, you're giving stuff away for free, and you are essentially trying to build a relationship with your prospects, then they will ultimately decide to come and do business with you because they value your advice, they value your expertise, and when they're ready, they'll come. So it's something you've got to be really consistent with. Further to that, leverage the information from experts. A good friend of ours and someone that we've worked with ourselves is Kat Haig, who runs a business called Growth Sprout. For those of you who don't know Kat or Growth Sprout, I advocate go search on Facebook and check them out. Kat was able to create a small business marketing, education and implementation app called Growth Sprout. And it helps small business people get really clear on what strategies and tactics are relevant to their business, teaches them why they're relevant, how to implement them, and then guides them through the steps. So shameless plug for Kat. If you want to check her out, jump on her website, she's got some communities on Facebook too, where she's constantly adding value. If you're a small business person who wants to get a finger on the pulse of marketing, that's where you've got to go.
Yeah, look, marketing's a big beast, and there's heaps of different strategies. There's heaps of different ways of doing it. But you need to nail it. Any business needs to know how to market, or they need to bring in someone who knows how to market. I hear a lot of people, especially in small business, they go, I'm not into marketing, I'm not into sales. Well, you have to be. Like, you don't have a choice. You're in business. You need to articulate the value that you can add to someone. Otherwise, no one's going to do business with you. And if you are scraping through and you are getting, business through some sort of manners without marketing or without any sort of sales techniques, then are you really maximizing your opportunities? Are you maximizing your potential of being a business person? And anyone in business has to market, and they have to have marketing and sales.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you're relying just purely on organic reach and organic business, you do not have control over your business. That business is 100% outside of your control. You need to get to a position where, yeah, of course, if you're getting organic business and things are just happening, that's fantastic. But you need to be able to master the art of being able to control the flow of opportunities that you have coming into your business. And only at that point can you sleep easy to know that irrespective of what happens in the economy, in the market, whatever, you have the ability to control the outcomes of essentially your business and your revenue streams. So
we've had big Sal here, Big Sal Michelli. He's left the office and he's gone home, and he's asked us a question: should we all be scared of Meriton? I can see them from my backyard.
Taking over the world.
You're going to be all right, Sal. You are going to be all right, mate. You just stay there in the house, and Meriton will go away.
Big Harry Triggerboff. Don't be scared of Meriton. In any case, they're very slowly taking over the real estate world, but that's okay.
Thanks for the question, Big Sal.
Thanks, Sal. Thanks for your contribution, mate. All
right, so I had this from a client of mine that I worked with for years. He reached out to me today. He said, mate, I bought an apartment in Brisbane a couple of years ago and it has gone down in value. Should I sell it and buy something else? So to give you guys a little bit of background, so in Brisbane, while freestanding houses have performed relatively well and townhouses sort of haven't really done much, the unit and the apartment market's really struggled. It was a good bet, 2 or 3 years ago. Essentially, every commentator in the country was saying how good Brisbane was going to be. What ended up happening was there was an influx of developers. They loosened the development rules and they just built, skyscrapers all over the Brisbane skyline. And this has had the effect of, vacancy rates going up, developers really struggling to sell. They've been dropping prices, and this has had a flow-on effect throughout the unit prices in the entire city, not only just in the CBD, but it's flowed out into the suburbs as well. So his question: should he sell it and buy something else? I wouldn't. I wouldn't sell it and buy something else. Property has huge transaction costs. Every time you buy, you pay 4.5% stamp duty. You might pay some lender's mortgage insurance as well, which adds up. When you sell, you're going to be paying a seller's agent a couple %. You're probably going to pay some tax on it as well. There's legal fees and all that, bank fees along the way. So to get in and out of property probably costs you 10%, to get in and out the entire process. That means if you buy something for 500, you need to sell it for 550 just to break even. So you haven't made 50 grand, you've just covered your expenses. With that being the case, I wouldn't react to a market that's slowed down a little bit and hurry up and rush out and sell it. I would, it's probably got pretty good yields on it now. The rent's coming in. I'd make sure I keep it tenanted to help with the monthly repayments. And I would probably just hold on with it and let the markets do its thing. The thing with free markets is they react. All right, they don't do stupid things and not realise they're doing stupid things. So what's happened is the amount of development. How's this going to look on the screen? The amount of development in Brisbane has gone straight up. And then if you look at development approvals over the past 6 months or 9 months, as they've realised that they're building too many apartments, it's gone straight back down. So that's the developers and the banks going, all right, there's too much stock here. We need to just leave the market alone. Brisbane, the population's growing, the wealth of Brisbane is going up. So over time, those properties are going to get filled up and they're going to start going back up in value. So I would be patient. You know, the old Warren Buffett, be fearful when everyone's greedy, be greedy when everyone's fearful. That's what I'd be doing. I'm just hold on to the property.
Yeah, I think there's twofold here. You can't get into a property and just because other people have got lucky and made heaps of money in 1 year, think that just because you haven't had the same results that you throw in the towel. Any growth asset, whether it be property, shares, business, is a long-term investment. So if you buy it, you need to do so with the really presupposing that you're going to hold that for at least 10 years. Now, if we look at the cycles of Brisbane, it's actually operates in different cycles to Sydney and Melbourne. So what we've seen through history is that when Sydney and Melbourne have been going extremely strong and got to the peak of their market, is actually been the point in which Brisbane traditionally has been affordable and has shown all of the signs for future growth. And typically through Sydney and Melbourne's stagnancy phase, where it's essentially sitting flat, Brisbane has typically been where it has performed. So you need to be mindful that when you're getting in and investing in these things, if it's a good quality asset, it's tenanted, it's doing its thing, let it run its course. And further to that, this further illustrates the value of utilising a good quality property investment advisor for your next one. I would say that if you, and look, not to burn you for 2020 vision in hindsight, but hopefully anyone watching this can learn from the experience that a good quality property investment advisor would not have been recommending Brisbane units over the past few years because they could see the development applications being lodged, they could see the potential for vacancy rates increasing, and they could see that the capacity for oversupply was a tremendous issue and threat to long-term performance. So to give you some context, both Sam and I have property in Brisbane, but we have townhouses. And we did that for that very reason, to ensure that we had something that was easy to maintain given our busy lifestyles, and that we weren't in the unit market because we knew that that was going to be an issue long term. So once again, buy and hold, get good advice.
In hindsight, we should have bought houses, mate. We would have actually made a little bit of cash on them.
Nonna Panetta, buy a house.
Yes.
She would have told us that.
Yeah, look, I guess to finish that one off, this is something I'm really passionate about. You can't buy a growth asset, right? So shares or property, or even business for that matter, and try to sell it or flip it in a couple of years, and you're essentially flipping a coin. You're speculating. You might make money, you might not. Any real good quality asset, doesn't matter if it's property or shares or business for that matter, over a 10-year period will do well. All right. Historically, it always has. Any less than that, and you're punting, and you need to ask yourself, if you're buying a property with an outlook of less than 2 years, do you really want to buy a property? Is that helping you achieve any of your goals over the next 2 years? It's probably not, unless you're a developer and you can get in and out in the next 2 years. I'm assuming that no one watching this is a big-time developer, unless big Harry Triggerboffs are logged in, but yeah.
Alrighty, fantastic. All right, so this is a good question. I get this a lot. You wrote in your book a lot about achieving financial freedom. Is this really possible? Yes, 100%. Now, financial freedom is subjective. And in my book, I take all the readers through a number of activities for them to actually define what financial freedom means to them. I'm going to give you a scenario. Financial freedom for me is about being able to have the flexibility to work from anywhere. It's my ambition and my goal to have my principal place of residence here on the Northern Beaches, in Beacon Hill, overlooks all the beaches, and ideally be here for 8 months of the year. And my intention is also to have my house in the south of Brazil in a place called Florianopolis on the beach, where I can run client retreats and workshops for 4 months of the year, and have time that I can work abroad and do my kind of private client work and basically just work in a different environment. My idea of financial freedom is about having the flexibility to live that life. So in respect to that, it requires me to build a business that supports my ability to work autonomously or have the ability to work from abroad. and have the means to do that as well. So my barrier to entry for financial freedom is really about having enough means to buy those 2 properties. Once I have the means to do that, then the rest is actually pretty straightforward, because we're building a team that is able to work from anywhere in the world, and we're not geographically limited to having to stay on the Northern Beaches. We're here because we choose to be.
Half our team's offshore.
Exactly right. So further to that, beyond that point, I have no intention to retire. I have no intention to stop working, but I ultimately want to get to a point where I have the ability to continue to pursue other passions of my own, whether it be thought leadership, speaking, running workshops, masterminds, these types of things. So my idea of financial freedom is very different to others. The traditional sense of financial freedom is being able to get to a point where you can have that freedom of choice to choose whether or not you have to work. And that ultimately comes down to defining how much income you need and how much wealth you require to provide you with that level of income. So financial freedom is definitely possible. The sooner you start in pursuit of financial freedom, the better. But ultimately, you need to define what you want and then be able to create yourself a plan that you can follow and hold yourself accountable to sticking the course.
Yeah, no, I guess it's this question, it sort of drives back the point that most people just assume that they're always going to struggle with money. They've just got this thing in their head. They've always struggled with money and they're always going to struggle with money. Even people that are relatively successful, big house, nice cars, even though they might have enough money, they're working 100 hours a week in their business or in their job. So people just tune themselves in that, this is how life's going to be. And then I'm going to get to 70 and I'm going to retire. I'm going to go play bingo. And that's no one actually wants to do that. So I think it's important that, and Jackson's articulated this very well in his book, that it's important you get the message out there that, well, it's not the case. Financial freedom is achievable. It's hard and you need to work at it. We're not like the gurus that can do it for you in 28 days, financial freedom in 28 days or in 2 days or something. But, if you stick to it for years, you can achieve it.
Cool.
All right, we've got time for one more question.
Time for one more question.
All right, so this is something I spoke to about a client yesterday. My wife and I want to keep our unit and upgrade to buy a house. However, the bank won't lend us any more money. What can we do? So this is a common scenario these days. Years ago, if you had equity in the property, you could borrow against it and do the next one. And that's still possible, but you need to have the income to back it as well. Years ago, you could structure it in a way that the income wasn't as important, but today there's no way around it. The new rules are really tight. I guess outside of what we spoke about earlier, about saving a bigger deposit or earning more money, the only other thing you could do in that scenario is actually sell the unit, use the proceeds from that unit, combine that and pay off all the debt. So let's say your unit's worth 900 grand, you've got a $500,000 debt on it, you sell it, you pay a little bit of cost. Let's say you walk away with around 400 grand, use that big thick deposit as the deposit for your next property, and then borrow the remainder. If the bank won't lend you any money and you really, really want to get that bigger property, you want to go from a unit to a townhouse or a townhouse to a house or unit to a house, whatever it is you want to upgrade, and you can't keep both properties and do it, then what do you got to do? You've got to look at selling one. It matters what's more important to you. Is it the wealth you're going to generate over the long term for having 2 properties, or do you want to have the lifestyle and have a bigger home?
Yeah, we spoke about this on the weekend as well. Consolidating your situation isn't a step backwards. In some cases, it can work out better for you financially, because you need to understand that if for however long you've got a mortgage, you are just renting your house from the bank. So you need to do the maths. And there's very simple cash flows that we can prepare for you to show you the value of consolidating or trying to get it across the line to hold both assets at the same time. Because you need to understand that if you're using equity in existing property, and you're using that equity in order to go buy this new property, which is going to become your principal place of residence, it's likely that you're going to have a substantial amount of bad debts or non-deductible debts that you're paying for in after-tax dollars, which isn't necessarily a good outcome. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of your household budget that's going to go to support it. So by consolidating your situation, you're essentially just consolidating all of your wealth into a single property with a much more manageable mortgage. And once the dust has settled after that, then you can always look into what opportunities exist for you to use that equity that you now have in that new house to then go and continue to build your wealth through property or through other assets as well.
All right, excellent stuff, mate. That's a quick hour.
We smashed out some questions, so hopefully you got some value. Of course, for those of you who aren't able to catch us live, feel free to post the questions in the comments or keep flicking us emails or private messages. We'll continue to collate your questions and tick them off the list next week in our Ask Aureus Anything. And we look forward to catching up with you next time.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy your night.
Have a good one.